Good evening. First of all, I want to thank every one of you who, it's a Southern California rain. It's really not at this point a downpour. Nonetheless, we are very rain averse in Southern California. Even a few drops are intimidating. So you are the diehards. And I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. We also have some folks on Zoom. So a reminder to the panel, speak into the microphones because it's not just being heard here, but also the folks on Zoom, including some people who would have been here in person, but for a few drops of rain. My name is Rick Cole. I'm deeply honored to be the council member for District 2, just a little over a year now in office. Thank you. Um, I'm even more deeply honored. Thank you very much for that. I'm blushing. Um, And tonight is one of, I think, the most intriguing and significant of our issue forums. We've had one each month. I think we skipped last August, but we've talked about solar energy, we've talked about public safety, we've talked about affordable housing, we've talked about a lot of topics here in these sessions. But this one is not one that's obvious as top of mind, and yet it should be. So what we're going to talk about tonight is, what does the city manager do? How is the city manager chosen? And what should we as a community and the city council be looking for in our next city manager? As some of you know, after serving for 12 years on our city council, I went to work for a statewide nonprofit. And 3 years after having left the city council, I applied to be the city manager in Azusa. Surprisingly, the city council voted unanimously to select me as their city manager. And the reason it's surprising is because normally the career path for city managers is not through elective office. That is very unusual. Not unprecedented, but very unusual. Most city managers have worked their way up, oftentimes from interning in a city manager office when they're in college or graduate school, working in a city manager job in that department as an assistant to the city manager. We have one of those in the city of Pasadena. Sometimes city managers come up through the ranks of other departments. Sometimes fire chiefs become city managers. Sometimes economic development managers become city manager. The most common career paths are finance and economic development. It's actually relatively rare to come up, for example, from parks and recreation. Although one of my role models in the field came up that way, but he had to apply for about 50 jobs before he finally got one, before finally someone took him seriously. And then he did a remarkable job and ended up being city manager of Palo Alto. Like Pasadena, one of those cities that tends to attract the top people in the field. And that goes to an important part of the pluses and the minuses of the city manager form of government. Many cities will promote from within. An assistant city manager or someone who's maybe worked their way all the way up from an entry-level job over 20 or 30 years. But more often than not, at least here in California, city managers move around. I, for example, was city manager in 3 different cities over the course of 20 years. That's both a plus and a minus. The plus is you get the benefit of really deep experience and ideas from other communities. So the person who's your city manager who's had experience in other cities brings that experience with them. The downside is they have to learn the community. And sometimes people are skeptical because they grew up in the community. They're deeply invested in the community. And here comes this person from out of town who's now suddenly the most powerful person in our city government. I say that with all due respect to our mayor, but under our city charter, The mayor is part-time. The mayor makes 30-some thousand dollars a year. The city manager earns between $385,000 and $425,000 to give you a sense of the difference in responsibility, right? The manager makes more than 10 times as much as the mayor. We'll talk in the course of the discussion a little bit about the relationship between the council, the mayor, and the city manager, as well as the department heads and the staff. But I want to get into a great panel for that discussion. I'm really pleased that my three top choices for this panel tonight all said yes. And so these really are the three people I think can give you the best perspective from a Pasadena standpoint about those three questions. What does a city manager do? How are they chosen? And what should we be looking for in our next city manager? So beginning on your right, Chris Holden was until very recently the longest serving member of our city council, 24 years, I want to say, before becoming our state assembly member and serving us for 12 years. So he's spent a lifetime in public service. He started when he was 4. Uh, um, and he's recently retired from public service and is the executive director of Fire Justice, who were involved in the lawsuits against Edison to recover damages from the Eden fire. Chris was mayor when Phil Hockey, who was our city manager then, resigned. Chris was involved in that transition, and we'll talk about city managers get fired. And that is not necessarily because they've done anything wrong. It is because the council is looking for a different kind of leadership. And so Chris was involved in that transition, and the person who was selected came from within, and that's Cynthia Kurtz, who had been the public works director, one of the very first female public works directors in the state of California, and served for a number of years. I want to say 8 or 9 years as city manager. 10 years as city manager. Okay, fair enough. And so has a tremendous amount of experience before and after her service as city manager, and currently represents the city of Pasadena on the Metropolitan Water District. That is the folks who provide more than half of our water from the Colorado River and from the State Water Project from Northern California. And then we have our current city manager, who we are I would be wearing a black armband because we really are in deep mourning. I was not part of his selection, but I have been extraordinarily impressed over the past year that I have been on the city council with his temperament, his character, and his values. And we're going to talk about where those come in, because oftentimes where city councils focus on is expertise and experience, and those are important things. But temperament, judgment, values, character, those are important, and we'll talk about why those are important dimensions. And so Miguel, as part of his character, his dad passed away late last year, unexpectedly, leaving his ailing mother really to fend for herself. She does not speak English well, and she doesn't drive at this stage and has some health challenges. And so we all understand that it's his responsibility to take care of his mom. And so that's why he's stepping down after only 3.5 years in the job. Now, has he made everyone happy every week? It turns out that that is impossible. And that's part of what comes with the job. It is a tough job, and it's made tougher. And now I'm going to turn to the panel to make kind of opening thoughts about their view on what a city manager does. But having done this for 20 years, one of the things that you have to understand about a city manager is if things are going right, that's the council's fault. If things are going badly, that's your fault. That comes with the job. You don't get out in front of the elected officials and say, look at me, I did that. You give credit to the mayor and the city council who hired you and who support you. And if things are going wrong, everyone looks at you and says, what's up with that? So the community often sees the city manager through a glass darkly. They don't see what sort of goes on behind the scenes and what goes on in terms of the 2,300 staff people that the city manager is responsible for, all 2,300 of them. And of course, there are some who do heroic work. There are some who make mistakes, probably all of us. And the city manager is responsible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, as long as they sit in that chair for every single one of them. That's a significant responsibility. So Chris, let's start with you. What's your view of what a city manager in Pasadena does? What's their job? What's the scope of their responsibilities for folks who may not have followed this closely?
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me to be here. When I said yes, the weather report said no rain, but it's all good. This is an important topic and one that I really take a lot of pride in being a part of a council that was responsible for city managers. I came in under Don McIntyre, and I'm dating myself, aren't I?
I think you're also, it's interesting to say you came in under Don McIntyre since
Yeah.
you were his boss.
Well,
or at least
well,
one.
I had to get 3 more people to make that work, but
And
but
eventually you did.
yeah, well, we did. We
Yeah.
did. But let me just answer the question and say that the city manager, as Rick has already articulated, is a very important and very powerful position because it's the only position that can govern over and give direct direction to the employees of the city of Pasadena. There is a very important role in that because you want a professional city manager. That's how the city has outlined its charter and how it desires to move forward. I think, as Rick also pointed out, having an elected mayor is a very important position too, because it's out of the 8, there's a person who then represents the views, if you will, through an election process of the entire city and each other council member from individual portions of the city. The city manager is in a very important position, but one that can be very precarious from time to time because, one, it's about communication, not only with the council. I remember during my time as a member of the council, we met on a regular basis, as we all members do, with the city manager to talk about things that are particular to our district, but also what we might see as important issues that are coming before the council that require all of us to participate as one body. I think, generally speaking, having the role of being able to manage department heads, to be able to interface with the council, to be able to align with priorities. A city manager who is doing their job very effectively is one who is sharing information with the council so there are no surprises. There's an opportunity to have dialogue. The city manager does a good job, at least the ones that I've worked with, of taking notes. Not always, as was pointed out, coming up with a solution that lines up with an outcome that I might have desired, but one that we all get a chance to then share, not only as a council, but with a community on outcomes that we think are best given the diversity of the makeup of a council. This council, the city's always had, for the most part, diversity of opinions, and therefore a city manager generally steps in to try to be the one to move an agenda that the collective council and the community has articulated. General plans are very important because they lay out sort of a vision for the city. So directing the planning department and other departments to work collaboratively to come up with plans to then report back to the community and also to the council become part of the role of a city manager. I think it's also safe to say that even though the city manager does not uh, have a political role per se, it's smart for them to be engaged with the community as well as with the council, not overreaching, but also being available. And I think, as I described before, when there's general plan conversations, it's important to be present for those in various sectors of the city to be able to see the city manager and view that person as someone who hears them, sees them, understands their issues and concerns. Usually the council member is joining the city manager at community meetings so that there's an opportunity for dialogue to happen and respect for the member who represents a particular area of the city, that they are there to be seen as 1/7 or 1/8 of the representative leadership of our manager. I think that clearly budget is the most important document that the community and the council wrestles with, and it's very imperative that the city manager understand not only through the council but through the community what the priorities are, because the budget reflects those priorities of a community. And clearly, Pasadena has been exemplary in so many different ways in how we've invested resources. And that happens because you have a city manager and a council that provides oversight. The council, I think, is very much a part of helping to collectively guide the direction for a city manager, but we also have to trust the city manager to go out and work with the staff to make sure that they're providing the best recommendations back to the council. And that was what pointed out. Sometimes that leads to healthy discussion and debate. And I think at the end of the day, what I've noticed amongst all the city managers I've worked with is that they're not there to say, uh, I'm going to arm wrestle for the votes to endorse what I'm putting forward. It is just the best professional recommendation that they see fit to put before the community. And that's what you have to expect from a city manager. And if they start to put their finger on the scale one way or another, then it starts to become a little bit more tense. So I think that it's a tough job. It's one that I would never want, but but I will tell you that the two sitting to my right are two of the best, and the one sitting to my left, and the roles that he's played as city manager and the feedback that I've gotten over the years really put their heart into it. They are true professionals. They know what it's like to reach out and to gain consensus and at least be visible in the community. And I think those are all important, and that's why I'm sitting here next to them to be able to say good things about them.
Cynthia, drawing on your 10 years of experience in Pasadena, but also your colleagues, because there are different kinds of city managers in different cities and different city managers at different times. So um, how do you see the role and how do you see it maybe changing?
First of all, let me figure out how to use the mic. Closer. All right, thank you. First, good idea. Thank you. Anyone that has cues on things I should do, please speak up. First, I just want to say thank you for the invitation. Sitting with these three people who have served the public in so many different roles in so many different places is really truly an honor to me. And to your question, that's what I was thinking as I still say council member. I'll try to remember to say assembly member. Holden said, city managers don't do the same thing in all cities. Now, a lot of the things that we just heard, the budget, the operation, the employees, the hiring, the oversight, yes, that's consistent. But I've had the privilege of working for a number of cities in different roles, but 3 different cities as city manager. And I found, as I learned the culture of each of those, that some things that they expected of their top administrative office were different. And I think the one that stands out most to me for Pasadena is the involvement that the community has. Not all communities have that kind of intense involvement. I was reading the other day when I was reading something about the budget. I think you have 33 advisory councils, committees, and commissions. Do
I've
you?
lost track.
Um, that's a lot for a city our size. It's even a lot for a city a lot bigger. Many cities just have a planning commission and maybe one or two or temporary budget, and the involvement here is far more far more people and far more intense. And that changes the role of city manager. It changes the type of city manager you look for. I think you said it, my way or the highway person is not going to make it in Pasadena, but someone that respects our process, believes that our processes mean a better outcome, has the patience, which I will admit I didn't always, but tries to have the patience to make sure that the processes work. Um, that's really, I think, very unique for Pasadena, at least among the cities I worked for. The other thing I'd add to what's already been said, and what I believe is the role of the city manager, is to help the council make decisions. You make a recommendation, and they may accept it, or your council may change it or something. But there are many a time when you're sitting at the dais and it's not going well. There's not a clear path on how to go forward. And the city manager needs to be listening really hard to everyone and trying to help them find the thread. And I know the joke is, do you have 5 votes? But in a sense, yeah, you're looking for the thread that connects 5 people to be able to move forward. It's not what the decision is it the city needs to make decisions and move forward. And you know what? If you make a bad decision, go back and change it, but keep moving forward. And I really think that is the role of the city manager, that pushing, making sure things are getting done when they get to the council and helping council find a way to move forward.
Miguel, Miguel, in the charter, the city manager has one boss, which is the city council. But in reality, you have 8 bosses. And as Cynthia said, uh, 5 votes speak on behalf of the whole council because that's a majority. And yet 5 votes can be fragile. One of the 5 could change. They could lose the next election. They could retire. Um, and so, how do you balance 8 individual agendas and the desire to serve the council as a whole?
Yeah, and it's even, first of all, let me say thank you for inviting me and thank you all for being here on this rainy night. It really, I think, demonstrates what we talk about civic engagement in Pasadena. Um, it's even more tricky in a way because of the Brown Act. So the 8 of them can't get together unless it's a noticed meeting and you take public comment and this and that. So they don't do it more than really once a week at most. And for a few hours at night, sometimes 3, 4, 5, sometimes 8. But and so you get your direction in public at that meeting. Now, that's one way to think about it. And so you say, well, that one boss that I have only meets every so often. But the reality is that I do meet with council members individually. I do send them, there's so many platforms to communicate these days. I send them texts, I send them emails, I do a lot of things, and I'm constantly trying to assess where they are. So to Cynthia's point, yeah, you want to make sure they move forward and they can get 5 votes to get something done. But that to me is if you're going to start doing that on the dais and listen to the conversation there and try to piece together a thread, you're never going to get there. You have to talk to them in advance, find out what their values are, find out where they're heading so that you can propose something that hopefully will get those 5 votes. But I also tell my staff that we can't be judged, as someone said earlier, on whether or not what we've recommended is what's adopted. That's not the test for success for staff. For staff, the test is, did you provide all relevant, full information so that the decision makers can make a decision and know the consequences? Sometimes, thankfully, I almost always agree with where they land, but not always. And people say, oh, we didn't get our way. It's like, it's not our way, it's their way. We work for them. It's my job to implement their policy. It's my job to help them come up and be fully informed and understand the consequences. But it's their job to be in touch with all of you and reflect that's how they get your vote. and to reflect the community's values. But as I said, you rarely have the whole council to tell you what to do. So you're operating independently a whole lot, but you understand the role is to implement their policy. And so, I came almost 4 years ago to come and interview for the position, but, maybe they knew it, maybe they didn't. I think, Cynthia, you were in the room when I interviewed. Yeah, they were interviewing me, but I was interviewing them, right? Because I knew that you can only be successful if your values align with who's on the council. And I got to know them and I got to talk to them and I said, yeah, this group of people, my values are aligned. I can be successful here. So having the value is important. And then the last thing I wanted to say is I've been thinking about, what people say, what do you do? What does a city manager do? I thought an interesting way to think about it is if an alien came down and just watched me do what I do all day, they probably write back to their superiors up in Mars or whatever, say, he talks to people all day and he signs things. And that's true. That's what I did all day today. But if you really think about it, I'm not just talking to people, I'm managing relationships, I'm comprehending complex problems. When I'm signing things, I'm exercising judgment about whether or not something should be approved or whether we need to go back and do it differently. And so those issues of, your comprehension skills, your judgment, your values, all those to me are far more important than how did you come up, what jobs did you hold, how well do you know this city, how well do you know, those things are important too. You have to have that base level of competence, but it's really those other skills. And I think Councilmember Cole mentioned some of those as he introduced the issue. Those are the really important ones. You get paid well, and really you're getting paid well to make decisions. And those decisions have to be well informed, and represent the values of the community. And the last thing I'll say is just with respect to my need to step away and take care of my mom. It's not a job. I've told this to my staff. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle. You're on 24/7, and I found that it's a lifestyle that's incompatible with elder care, at least at the level that I need to provide it. So that's why I'm stepping away. But we'll see what the future holds beyond that, as things progress, and as we'll see how my mom does in the long run. But it's just been such an honor and a privilege. So thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for letting me be your city manager for the last 3.5 years.
Miguel, so far we've talked about being managed by and managing up to the council, the relationship between the council and the manager as a prime source. And that's what gets in the newspaper, or it's what people gossip about. But most of your job is 12 departments, 2,300 staff, $1.5 billion budget, thousands of decisions that get made at every level, from the police officer who decides to give a ticket to someone or not, the customer service representative who decides whether to give a break to someone on their water bill because they had a leak. Those decisions get made, thousands of them, and you are at the apex of those decisions. And the hardest decisions are the ones that come to your desk. So if you don't mind sharing to folks in the audience what that part of your job is, and you have two of your 12 department heads here. You have your fire chief, Chad Augustine, and you have your HR director. Tiffany is leading the city manager search, and this is a confidential document, so I'm keeping it like the nuclear codes. But in here are all of the resumes of all the people that have applied for this job, because tomorrow the city council will meet and decide which 6 or 8 of these people we are going to interview for Miguel's job. So what about the job of managing the city? What's all involved in that?
There's a lot involved with the many decisions that are made every day in the city. You can't be involved in every single one. It's obvious. But first of all, we actually are up to, I might be wrong, so you guys can, I think we have 17 departments now. But I'm not in charge of the city attorney's office nor of the city clerk, but the other 15 I am. And you have to, a big part of what you do is you hire people. So you appoint the department heads. And I've had the privilege of appointing, and I forget the number, is it 13 out of 15? Something like that, since I've been here in the last 3.5 years. And then I have my own team. I have 3 assistant city managers, a deputy city manager, and an assistant to the city manager. That's 5 more people, and I've appointed 4 of the 5. So, you build a team so that they can lead their teams in a way that uh, reflects the values you'd like to instill in the organization for customer service, for community engagement, all the things we talk about that are really driven a lot by the council. And then to me, if you read the charter in Pasadena, it does empower the city manager to make a lot of decisions, to do a lot of things. But the way to get things done isn't to try to do all those things yourself. It's to recognize you have the authority, recognize that at the end of the day, it's going to lie on your desk, and you're the ultimate decision maker. And I think my staff understands that. But I think they also understand that I want to get stuff done. And so I am very good about delegating authority for them to make the decisions so that they can better serve you. Sometimes it goes wrong, and I have to be willing to take responsibility for that, and I do. But far more often, because I made really good choices in the people that I've hired, they make the right decision, and I'm very proud of it, and then I try to give them the credit. But that's the role that you have to play. That's how you get stuff done, where you have so many issues that have to be decided every day. And I'll just give you a great example. When the Eaton fires hit, I mean, my team just stepped up and everybody did what they needed to do. And I remember somebody saying, we tend to be trained to wait to be told what to do. And one of my executive staff said, gosh, I'm so grateful that our police officers didn't wait to get orders. When they saw people in the senior care facilities that needed to be evacuated, they picked them up, put them in a bus, and got them out. And that's true, right? They just, and that's because you build a culture where they know they're empowered to do the right thing, to serve the public, to exercise their judgment. And I think that's to me, the best way you can handle and really get an organization to try and make the decisions. You model it in your executive team, you keep pushing it down into the organization so that everybody understands why they're here, what their purpose is, and how we are attempting to best serve the community.
And Cynthia, in the same regard, you came up through the ranks in Pasadena. You were in charge of the capital program for the city, which is a huge responsibility. And that led to you ultimately becoming the public works director, and then interim city manager, and then city manager, and then back as interim city manager some years later. Different style and different temperament, as you've alluded to from Miguel. Um, uh, how does personal character, temperament, and leadership style affect the job?
A great question. And even before I worked for Pasadena, I'd spent 10 years in Portland, Oregon, working for that city. So local government has pretty much been all of my career. And I worked in environmental programs when I was in Portland, and then came here because Portland was having a terrible recession. And I thought I'd come down to California for just a couple years till Portland recovered, and then I'd go back to that city. That was about 40 years ago now. So temperament and being the leader in a city. Well, let me talk first about coming up through the ranks. I would say in Pasadena, for me, coming up through the ranks was a very good thing. I knew the city. I knew where all the sewers are. I know probably not what every city manager needs to know, but I really knew the city physically. What I was missing when I came into the role in the city manager's office is the more human service side of what a city provides, because cities provide both the social services and also the infrastructure services. And I felt very confident in my knowledge on the infrastructure. I had to learn the social services. But I think regardless of how you come into a manager's job, there's something you have to learn. There's There's no city manager college. Um, you can't say I can do it because I did it over here for 6 years. And there's no certificate or license that you can hold that would let a council know, yes, you're ready for this job. You come into every city having to learn something new that you don't bring with you. That new part cannot be, as our city manager has so eloquently said, your values and your commitment to local service. You have to have that under your belt. You have to really truly believe in that if you want to work for a city. There's no reason, though, that it has to be an inside person. I think that, and Assembly Member Holden can speak to that, given his different hiring practices he went through. Some were internal, some were external. And
Actually, there was a pattern I noticed. Mr. Hockey came from Toledo, Ohio. You came from inside. Mr. Beck came from Upland, or I forget what town he came from, but from outside. And then, uh, and then, um, and then Steve came up. I knew him as an intern in the finance department, and he'd worked his way all the way up to being city manager. So there was definitely a back and forth between inside and outside, and you were part of all those decisions. Chris, was there, was that deliberate? Or did that,
That was there.
no, was it deliberate to alternate between inside and outside?
No, it was not. As I recall, we first had to hire a firm that would go out because we decided that there would be, for the most part, an outside search. Um, Cynthia was different because she was there, that you're different. Well, and you've explained it. You were there. You were handling one of the largest departments in the city. You had the trust of the council. I think trust becomes very much a defining factor, and I think that you were involved. Public Works takes you out into all the communities, and you're certainly visible and carrying the message of what new infrastructure project is going to be making its way into the community, and that involves community engagement. So the community engagement part was there. So in many ways, with Cynthia was checking a lot of the boxes that were evident from her doing the job as Public Works Director. But with when Don McIntyre retired, and we did a full search at that point, and that was really recognizing that it was a city manager who had been in place for 17 years, and we thought it was important to try to go out and identify someone who might bring a unique perspective, representing other parts of the state or other parts of the country, and their experience in those areas, and how that might benefit through best practices or other things that might be unique that they would bring to the job. And so that search yielded us Phil Hockey. And I think that, so that was how Phil was brought in. And then, of course, after Phil, Cynthia, and then Michael Beck. And I think Michael Beck was a decision by the council, again, to go out and to really try to find someone who could come in and bring a unique perspective. And so I think it was just a matter of timing. It was just a matter of reading the tea leaves of where the community was at that particular time, where the council was at that particular time. And again, the first decision was, are we going to hire from someone inside? And if the decision was clear, if it wasn't clear, then we were more than likely going to go to an outside firm to help us identify. That didn't exclude anyone, but it also was to broaden the pool.
So if you have questions, there are two parts to tonight's program. The first is the panel discussion. And if you have questions for the panel, feel free. Meghy Derbogosian will pass out cards. We have cards tonight? Yes, she'll pass out cards. Write your question. I will feed them into the moderator. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for you to directly address your questions or even to make a comment. As long as it's short, it'll be open mic. So Cynthia, I interrupted you a little bit in talking about the role of temperament and and the role again of the kind of leadership approach. Did yours evolve over 10 years?
Um, Absolutely. When I think of what I knew and what I was doing the first week, and I think of where I was as I was leaving, let's say, the last month, probably two different people. You really do change in the role. I think your priorities get more focused and clearer. And part of that is what you're learning, both about your council, and of course, councils change. Over 10 years, there were different councils that changed, and some people were there the whole time, but some people came and went. And just as all of you sit on boards and committees, one person changing in the group changes the group dynamics. And so every time there was an election, there was a kind of a new change on how the manager and the council's relationship was. And that needs to change over time as councils change. Councils all changed during the decade that I was here in Pasadena. At least my perception is that they did. Younger people were getting elected and they were wanting to be more involved and take more than just this strict policy role. And I think that's a good thing. I'm not at all complaining about that, although I've heard some city managers who had gone through the period when they were really leading things and there were just policy decisions made, find that that was very disruptive to what they were doing. But I think that it actually represented a more involvement and listening to the community and was a good thing for Pasadena.
So we've talked about what a city manager does, and I think we've given you at least a sense of what that is. And if you have additional questions, we welcome them. But I want to talk now about where we are, which is we're actually selecting the next city manager. And city managers typically last around 4 or 5 years in smaller cities. Because they often either are getting to the end of their career and retiring, or they're moving on to bigger cities and bigger responsibilities. People tend to stay in cities like Pasadena a little bit longer, although the last city managers have only been about 5 years, and now 3.5. So we've had a shorter tenure than 10 years and 17 years in the past. So the selection process. Chris, you want to talk a little bit about, you already made some reference to the fact that first deciding whether to go inside exclusively or to do an outside search. And with the exception of Cynthia, we've tended to go with outside searches. Um, what was the most important factor in having a positive outcome? Because the first one that you and I participated in turned out to be kind of a mess.
Am I supposed to, what am I supposed to say? Yes, or well, I mean, look, there's no book on how these processes are supposed to be, right? You're first have to build a consensus of what the values are in a city manager that you want. Even before you start to get the resumes, you want to have at least some sense of how did the previous city manager and the administration handle the things that you thought were important or not? And then it kind of helps shape your thinking in terms of what values or perspective that the new city manager should have. And I think that is part of a conversation that the council has. It just, it's organic. Then the first decision is who's going to go out, what firm is going to go out and help us identify who is out in the rest of the world, who might be able to come into our community and bring a sense of newness, clear ideas about direction, that they're going to do their homework on our community. And we've always been told by those who are out doing the headhunting, if you will, for our city manager candidates, that Pasadena is a plum job. It's considered a city that is on the top of most city managers' lists, no matter where they are in the country. And I think that for a city that has that kind of reputation, there is going to be an opportunity to draw really the best that's out there. And so with that understanding, we hire a firm, the firm goes out and brings back a series of resumes that people respond to. Is it okay if I take a look at some of the? Um, you're keeping your oath. Good job. I think it's also important to really, for the council then to now do the job of really going through those resumes and seeing and making their notes. And so when they have an opportunity to do the interview and they have a chance to sit in front of these individuals, they can make a decision whether or not the resume is better than the presentation, or the presentation is better than the resume, or the resume kind of lined it up perfectly, and you thought as good as I thought they might be. Then they get an opportunity to come back again, and there's a whittling down of that process. Once you get down to probably the final two or three, even though this is a closed session process, and the council having done its job by having their own conversations with leaders in the community to get a sense of what others think are important and the values that they want individual members to carry forth in this conversation, then there's an opportunity for the headhunter, if you will, to help us whittle down the number. Uh, when you get down to about two or three, and because this is a process that is, it's difficult because it's closed session, and many times these individuals are interviewing for a job that their current employer does not necessarily know that they're interviewing for. And so you want to protect that. You want to recognize the importance of anyone who may not get the job, still has the one to go back to. And so we're having this opportunity to go through these interviews at the same time trying to find ways of making sure that without divulging who's in the finals, you know, that you're lining up with the community as best you can. And then at that point, when you have to pick one, you always hope that it's someone that stands out to everyone. I don't think I was a part of a unanimous city council. Ultimately, we got there. Maybe a certain number favored one and the majority or closer to the majority favored another. Then maybe the others had to be convinced that this person was still going to carry forth the values that were important, because you definitely don't want to be in a situation where your council splits on a vote to bring in a city manager.
And that's what I alluded to back in 1991, I think it was, or 1990. We did a national search and we narrowed it to 3 candidates. And the council was split 3, 3, 1. And the one thought, I'm going to win because I have the key vote. And at some point, the other 3 on one side or the other are going to come around to my candidate. The trouble was both of the factions that supported other candidates, that person was their third choice. So we literally were deadlocked, and it became embarrassing. It became ultimately racialized because people ultimately found out the backgrounds of the candidates, and it caused it actually reverberated into the next elections, and it made it very difficult for the person selected to dig himself out of that hole of just perceptions, fair or unfair. At the meeting after the person was chosen, 500 people showed up at the next meeting to protest. So obviously, that's 30 some years ago, and not likely to recur. But it does keep me up at night, worrying about making sure that we as a whole council come together on someone who we all can embrace. And I actually have a high level of hope based upon my interactions with my colleagues. And before we open it up, I will share with you the 5 things that we as a council agreed were the 5 most important things we were looking for in a city council. I'll share them in a minute. But we have a question for you, Miguel. Having come to Pasadena as a virtual outsider, what were some of the unique challenges you faced that were new to you besides the level of civic engagement? How did you address these challenges?
Yeah. When I think about that question, it was not just that I'd never lived in Southern California. I did intern for a law firm for 2 months or 3 months back in 1995, but it was not only that, I also didn't have a city background, which was very unusual. I did work for the city and county of San Francisco for 2 years, but that's San Francisco. Probably enough said on that. And I was a lawyer for most of my career and a judge. I'll bet, I don't have any real data, but I'll bet I'm the only former associate justice of the Court of Appeal who's a city manager. I think I'm unique in that. And I was the first, I believe, non-white city manager for the city of Pasadena. So, everything about me was, this guy's doesn't have a resume and a career path that says city manager at the end. But I was able to convince him of the values that I held and my dedication to public service and my abilities and my comprehension skills and whatnot. But what in Pasadena, I came here actually to explore. To be honest, most of my career was in counties. So when I said I want to come to Southern California where my extended family is, I said, let me look at the county of Los Angeles. And I won't say too much more about this, but I'll just say it's a hot mess. And I said, I don't want to go to the county. So now what? So I started looking at the cities, 88 cities in LA County, which is incredible. And I studied the charter and I looked at how it's structured. And I said, this is where I want to be, at least in terms of governance structure. Because I knew having the authority I have as city manager, I can get a lot done. And that's important to me. And then, as I said, my values aligned. But when I came down for the interviews, is really the first time I'd gone to the Rose Bowl a whole bunch of times for football games, but I'd never really been in the city. And I come to City Hall and I said, wow, this place is incredible. And then, you do day 1 of interviews, you go back to see if as I said, see if you get a rose to come back the next day. And so I started driving around and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So much history, so much architecture, so much beauty in this city. And I just knew I found a special place. I don't think there was, I was a little bit concerned myself, like, gosh, I've never headed up a city, but I had a lot of management experience. The county I came from, I was the number 2 person. I was the chief operating officer running the whole thing, 23,000 employees. $12 billion budget. Here you have about a $1 billion operating budget and 2,300 employees. So it's about 1/10 the size. I said, I got this. It's 1/10. Little did I know, it doesn't matter the size, it's the complexity of the issues. And it's as complex here as anywhere I've been. So it's really tested me on a number of levels, but I think I felt comfort even though I didn't know Pasadena, even though I didn't know cities and all that kind of stuff. I'd worked with cities in the county because we had 15 cities in the county of Santa Clara. So I understood cities, but I never headed one or really worked for one. But a good friend who used to work for Pasadena, I called her and I said, hey, I just got the offer for city manager of Pasadena. What do you think? She said, take it. For whatever reason, they hire smart people who stay a long time. And that's all I really had to hear. And I decided then and there that I was going to come. So I don't know that there was anything in particular. I was very surprised at how easy it was to adapt from county management to city management. There's some nuances, but the nuances are less important than really sort of how we're structured, how governance works. So I don't know that I could say that there was anything pinpointed that I was unable to comprehend or to deal with or that surprised me. And frankly, I was just really, and we had such a good staff, thanks to Cynthia and my predecessors and everybody else. There's such a good staff that you all have in your city government that it was just easy. They welcomed me. They taught me what I needed to know so I could exercise the judgment to keep the city moving forward.
So let me explain the process. We decided because we needed to move quickly because Miguel has family responsibilities, that we would not do what the first step that Chris outlined, which is to look for a recruiter from scratch. We instead opted to use the recruiter that we used 3.5 years ago that brought us Miguel. That's unusual because typically when you're spending public money, you want to go out for competitive bids, but speed was more important. So, and that had gone well. Obviously, we were happy with the results. So she immediately hit the ground running before the holidays and developed a brochure that really is our advertisement to the world that we're out looking for a city manager, and this is the kind of city manager we're looking for. I personally, because of my experience, pressed very, very hard and successfully to get the council as a whole to decide what's most important. Because each of us have our individual desires. There's 8 of us. And if we each have 3 things, that's 24 different things we're looking for. And there is no such person who could meet all of those desires. And so I thought it was really important that we distill the things that were most important. Let me read those to you. These are the 5 things that we thought were most important, based on our own personal experience, but also what we'd heard in the community and discussions that we had with people in that time. Strategic, human-centered leadership, leading with empathy, emotional intelligence, integrity, and accountability while balancing decisiveness with collaboration and trust building. I have to say that I don't think we would have written it that way if we hadn't had the experience with Miguel. I think that Miguel impressed us not with his expertise of knowing everything about where the sewers were, but because of his values and his temperament. We realized how important that is. The second is, and this is something I was surprised at how much the council embraced this second one, because this is why I ran for city council. Innovation and adaptability, challenging conventional approaches, embracing and managing change to continuously improve how the city serves residents and businesses, and ensuring Pasadena remains a leader in meeting new challenges. Number 3, operational excellence in a complex city. Managing full service organization that includes utilities, large venues, regional assets, while delivering high quality services citywide. 4th, workforce excellence and labor relations, building a strong organizational culture. And I want to come back to culture. Maintaining labor peace, recruiting, developing, and retaining top executive and staff talent. And finally, the one that we started with, effective council manager partnerships, supporting policy development, implementing council direction, and navigating political complexity with professionalism and transparency. I can tell you that not all of my colleagues in the city manager world believe in transparency. Many of them keep their cards very close to the vest. That is how they manage, is they have the keys to the kingdom, and the council sometimes is in the dark about what all is going on, and that's part of their power. There was a legendary city manager that preceded me in Santa Monica who always knew when to find money because he has stashed it. He had hidden it in all sorts of different pots. So when the council said, oh, we need to open a new homeless shelter, he would say, well, it's a tough budget year, but I think we can identify $2 million over in this. And that's great. And so he lasted for a long time because whenever they really needed the money, he had socked it away somewhere where no one could know about it except him. So we're looking for someone who lays their cards out on the table. And that's a different culture. And so let's go to culture. What kind of culture did you encounter, Miguel? And we'll get Cynthia's perspective as well. What kind of culture did you encounter? And what kind of changes did you think were needed? What things did you really want to preserve? And what kind of message did you get from the council on that score of just how to operate the city?
Yeah, as I said, I had the blessing of inheriting an organization that Cynthia was in charge just before I came, but the whole organization, I think, as I said earlier, was very smart and had been here for a long time, very competent. We did go through, and this predates me, but some of you may remember, and I don't have the exact dates, 2015, 16, 17, there was an embezzlement. And I think it was on the order of $5 to $8 million were embezzled from a particular fund. And so when I got here, there was still a lot of rules in place to tighten up how money was authorized in response to that. And we've come to a better place over time. You know, once the culture is one that really cares for that kind of accountability. But I heard your story about this, I think you said city manager in Santa Monica
Mhm.
and having money, and that's inconceivable to me. As I said, it's because the job is to fully inform the decision maker. So you never hide money. And this might come from my background as a lawyer. But and I was had a particular career where I used to serve a lot of different school boards and county boards of supervisors, things like that. Um, the most important thing is, again, less about competence and all that. You know, you have a lot of professionals who are very schooled in lots of different technical ways, but ultimately you have to gain the trust and confidence of the city council. Once you have the trust and confidence, they'll accept if you make a mistake. They'll accept if something goes wrong. But you can only build that trust and confidence if you lay your cards on the table, and are honest about your weaknesses, honest about the things you have to fix, which I'm very honest with all of them about what's really going on. So the culture is one that, I guess, again, just feeling really blessed that it was so strong when I came here. Now, one thing, the executive team, and I have two executive members here, but you know, I came to visit before I started in the summer of 2022, and they said, "Come meet your executive team." And so they put 2 hour block, and I wanted to get to know all of them, and I knew they wanted to get to know who I was. So I tell them about myself. Probably 25, 30 minutes go by, and I said, "But now I want all of you to tell me your life story so I know who I'm managing." And I said, "Who wants to start?" Crickets. So I said, "Oh my goodness." And then I said, "Well, let me tell you a little more about myself, but think about what you want to tell us, and then I'll come back and give you a chance." So I say a little more, I make up some stuff, and then I said, "Okay, who's going to go first?" Crickets. And I'm like, "Gee." And this is my first time meeting my staff. And then I said, well, they scheduled for 2 hours. It's 40 minutes in. You guys have work to do. I need to get back to Northern California. So let's just end it. But, you know, and we'll come back to this. And so I don't know why that was, but when I inherited that team, there was a lot of trepidation. I think there was a lot of trepidation throughout the organization. Um, and maybe that's a cultural thing. I don't know, but I worked really hard to build that executive team, to build trust in the executive team, to delegate authority to the executive team. And now when I go in there, I can't hardly get them to stop talking and joking around so we can get to business, because they like working with each other. They share everything, they share their problems, and it's made us a much more effective place. And again, trying to push that down from what we call the executive leadership team all the way down to the, you know, entry level technician, to understand that that's how we best get our work done.
Thoughts on culture, Cynthia?
On culture.
Yeah, the culture of an organization, and particularly the culture of Pasadena's organization.
If I could just say two other things, going back first. Miguel made the comment, I convinced them that I was the right person. I sat in that room. There was not a lot of convincing to do. I watched as that interview moved on and then went to the interview the next day. I could tell the council had found someone they wanted to work with. They saw a relationship building, and they trusted this person. And that's really important. I know both of you know, when having been in a position of hiring people. And the second is that any from the city manager's standpoint, what Councilmember Cole was talking about from the council standpoint of the split, any city manager who takes a job on a 3-4 split has got about a year's worth of employment. You just don't do that. You need to know that you have a group that you can work with, or you need to, as I know you would have said, this isn't the city for me. But hopefully that will not be a problem for you this time. The culture, I think two things in culture. We've talked a lot about the community culture, but Miguel's now started to talk about the culture inside and how you build that and how you work with the team inside, because you're not making all the recommendations. You have to have a mindset where you understand each other and people understand the direction of the city, both from the council, but also from the city manager. And I did something that I don't know that either of my previous bosses here knew I did. I had a gentleman, his name was Dr. Fabricatori. And when I would hire someone after they'd been hired, I would tell them, this is available if you want. He had interviewed me and he knew my style and he knew how I worked. And I said, I will never know whether you go talk to him or not. But if you want to go talk to him, he will tell you, where my buttons are. Some I probably don't even know, what I do, what my style is, what my pace is, how I work. And he talked, they did not have to go do that. If they chose to, he would then tell me something about them. And I remember I hired someone, it was a man, he ended up being one of the best department heads I had worked with. But Dr. Fabricatori told me, you think he's so good and that he can make all the decisions, but he's not confident enough yet. So you need to stop and give him attaboys sometimes. And you're not an attaboy person. You're a person, but you need to stop and tell him, even, he did great at council last night. What an easy thing to learn. And he was incredibly successful. The community loved him. The council members loved him, and he did a great job. He was with the city for over a decade, and it all just took me understanding his personality. So those cultural relationships, one-on-one and with the executive team, are really important as well. And if you think about that, what does this person need from me to be successful? And then are willing to share some of the kind of peel the skin back and let them know some of the things they should know about you too. I'm not a morning person. Learn that right away. It just helps with the relationship. So there's lots of different cultural experiences going on, and the one with the staff, I think you spoke to very well, and it's really, really important.
This is in some ways a rhetorical question, although it's a serious one. All your candidates, that is the people in this book, will have had experience managing budgets, personnel, and tough issues. Temperament and judgment are pretty subjective. One objective criteria is someone who already knows the Pasadena ethos, the players, our shared history. And by the way, in this book are a couple of inside candidates. Have we undervalued this criteria? And I will answer in one. I'll provide my answer. I don't think this council will have undervalued that. I think that we recognize that Pasadena is special, but having worked for 5 cities, everybody thinks they're special. And everybody thinks and has a good compelling reason for why they're special, different from Pasadena's specialness. And it is important to be attuned to that. That is one thing that if we hire from outside, we will expect them to be sensitive to the need to learn and appreciate the Pasadena ethos and to appreciate our unique aspects. Because and this is why whenever I became a city manager, I resisted the temptation that many other city managers do, which is they immediately bring in their own team. I resisted that because I thought, I don't want to be an occupying army. I want to learn and respect and understand the people who are imbued in that community. Um, I obviously am their boss. And so I have a responsibility to lead in the direction that the city council is um, choosing. But um, but I need to respect that they've been there a long time. They know their jobs and they know the community. And then, of course, the community voices. It's not just the people who work there, but beginning to get out and to know the diversity in the community. I'll just tell you one quick story. Um, Brand new city manager, go into the community of Azusa, had the advantage of a 5-0 vote. Um, but the meetings were toxic, not among the council members, but there had been such turnover that the blood was always in the water. Over the previous 15 years before I was hired, they'd had 7 city managers in 15 years. And every 2 years, at least 2 of the 5 seats turned over. So there never, for 15 years, every 2 years, there were at least 2 new faces on the city council. So what that created was a culture where people were auditioning to be a new city, to be the next city council member by calling the current city council crooks, pedophiles, idiots, morons. And this was the first 20 minutes of every meeting. And it was, I was like, where have I landed? Speaking of aliens. And because again, the council that hired me, I actually kind of liked them. I thought they were pretty smart. And so what we chanced upon was one of the council members was a kindergarten teacher, and the closest thing you'll get to a saint in an elected official. And so we began inviting the Little League baseball team that won the divisional championship to bring their parents to the meeting. And the parents would look at these people calling the council names and say, and so the people that were calling names eventually just stopped coming because all of these wonderful things were happening in the community. So cultures can change. And the result was I was there for 6 years. I was 1 year away from being the longest serving city manager in the history of the city in 100 years. And all of the city council members were reelected in the next 3 elections. It just settled everything down and things began to grow smoothly. That's why I ended up getting recruited to go to work in another city. Is I built a successful track record. But when I first came there, if you'd said what a place Azusa is, you would have said a place of toxic politics. 6 years later, the local paper, the San Gabriel Valley Tribune, was calling us the most improved city in the San Gabriel Valley. So let's open it up to any of you to ask questions or to make brief comments. And then I'm going to ask each of you to sort of close with your thoughts about looking ahead, what we should be looking for, what we should be expecting in our next city manager. Suzanne, our Environmental Advisory Commission member from District 2.
Wow.
This is for the Zoom.
Hi, thank you so much for all your input. I loved right from the start you talking about community engagement and trust and all those things that you're looking for. One of the most salient challenges I think that exists today in government and politics is the civic engagement from younger people. And it's easy to understand why. My kids say they have to move out of California because they can't afford to live here, which of course, if you own a home, you want to be very engaged. So, and I just wondered if you had some thoughts about that, how a city manager might help to support and sustain those kinds of values that you talk about in terms of outreach.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's something that I see. I do love, and our secret sauce in Pasadena is civic engagement, but it's rarely people under 30. Right? And what
Rarely people under 40, if we're honest.
Try to be. But you know, one thing I can't. Here's an example. When the 710 stub, and we looked at that, and what are we going to do? The council created a committee. And I think this is before your time, and I think they wanted to have through the various appointments 13 people on it, and so they appointed the 13 people, and then they said, Mr. City Manager, maybe we can come back and let us know if we're missing anything. And, I had to think about a nice way to say it, but I said, well, it'd be good if you had, it's going to take a while to develop the 710. It's be good if you had someone under 50, because they hadn't, and they didn't even think about it. So it's just really having the courage to call them out and say, this isn't even going to be for us. By the time it's done, everybody that's 60, 65, they're not going to be able to enjoy it in the same way. So, it starts by really valuing the young voice, but also having the courage to call people out and say they need to be here at the table. What do they say? If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And we need to let them sit with us and express their views, and then really meaningfully listen to what they're saying and help them be, part of the solution.
Chris, you were. Yeah. Chris, you were the youngest council member ever elected when you took office. How do we recapture that outreach to people in their 20s and 30s?
Well, that's a good question. I think I'm starting to see that activism. I wouldn't say that I was an activist per se, but I grew up in a political environment, and so I saw what public service was about. So I never viewed it as politics per se. It's what you do when you're trying to navigate through it, but it's public service. And for me, my career was established by working for a juvenile hall out of college.
You ran actually for office unsuccessfully the first time, or came short.
Thank you for remembering that.
But you were very young then. How old were you when you first ran?
23.
23.
Yeah.
So remarkable.
Yeah.
And then when he did win 4 years later at 27, he was a veteran.
Well, I think, and to that point, I remember my dad said, not where you serve, it's how you serve. And I had to disconnect from the election and then not be that kind of guy that ran and then disappeared and no one saw him ever again. So I was appointed to the Human Relations Commission. I was appointed to the Fair Oaks Project Area Committee, and you were on the council and helped appoint me to that. So I appreciate that. Thank you. You helped jumpstart my political efforts there. I served on a board of the Red Cross. And so what I did was I wanted to stay engaged. And interestingly enough, the council appointed me, among others, to a light rail alignment task force. And that was back in 1985 to recommend to the council what route the then Blue Line would take through into the San Gabriel Valley through Pasadena. Fast forward to my last year in the California State Assembly, we were able to get $850 million to finish the Gold Line to Claremont. So it just goes to show you that young people do grow old, but it's also indicative about how you want to get young people in and become policy proficient, understanding community engagement, how to shape policy for a community. And I don't think that whether it was serving on a county, on a council, or whether it was serving on a commission, I think creating an opportunity for young people to be engaged on commissions creates an opportunity to build a bench.
That's been one of the things I've been very conscious of in my appointments to commissions. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I just very quickly wanted to add that I think there are two ways to get people, youth included, to be part of decision making. One is to invite them, and we've spoken to that, but we've also heard stories tonight. The other is to enrage them. And I feel that too much of what our politics are today is the latter, and we're seeing more and more people get engaged because they're angry. That's not the way you need It's not the way you have to do it. That's not the right way. We need to invite them.
Okay, yes, Jim.
This meeting is about choosing a city manager, but none of us in this room are really going to have much to do with that except Rick. So my question is, especially for Miguel and Cynthia, is there something you would like Rick to really think about in the next week?
What a great question, Jim. Thank you.
Can we see the book?
You can see it. It's right there.
Yeah, I think that someone who, in all the candidates that you look at the end of the day, as I said, you're talking to people all day, but it's about managing relationship. It's about somebody with high emotional intelligence. It's about someone who cares about other people. Right? And that's, because you are the leader of a whole 2,300 people in the city. It's a small city. And so a lot of the people you see on the street are your employee. I think we might be the second or third largest employer in the city. And if you don't relate well to them and truly value them as people and understand where they're coming from, I don't see how you can be successful. And I fantasize about what I would love to be as city manager, is kind of like a conductor of a symphony where I'm playing music, but more often than not, it's more like air traffic controller where I'm just trying not to let the airplanes crash. But all of it takes emotional intelligence and understanding and really being fully engaged in the humanity of what we're doing.
Cynthia, do you have something to add?
I'm not sure that it's adding to what we've talked about, but I think of it as a three-legged stool. And it's the three C's. It's the council, it's the community, and the candidate. They all have to align to make it the right person. And I actually personally have great faith in the council that we have seated today. I am not concerned that they will not make a good decision. They made a good decision last time. There's been a couple changes, but if anything, only to improve our council. And I'm sure we're in good hands.
Yes, Sandy. I'm going to hang on to the microphone if you don't mind.
I hear over and over that a lot of what we need is emotional intelligence, relationship building, fundamentals of finance operations. Those are things that we want people to come up through, the ranks with. But how do we get more women involved as city managers? How do we cultivate women into a pathway that gets them into the city manager ranks? And it's not saying anything bad about the men, but ultimately, we have 7 city councilmen who are men, many of whom are attorneys, and one woman who is a JAG attorney and did not come up in quite the same way the other guys did.
Thoughts on that?
I feel like I should take this, but I don't have an answer. As we joked one night when I was back as my second stint as interim, and the mayor said, and Cynthia was our first woman city manager. And I corrected him and said, and your second woman city manager, and you ought to be doing better. I don't know. I mean, I don't know from the applicant pool if women aren't interested. I mean, I remember when I first put my name in the hat, it's something you take very seriously that, can I step into this job and what will the role be? But women are certainly very qualified. And I think more are getting into the business, as they say. How to make them more comfortable. I just don't have a good answer. Do you have?
I don't, other than I was trying to find if I could, they did a survey of city managers, and actually there's a lot of female city managers today. So there's in smaller cities. So gosh, it's probably getting close to half and half. I do think that in the bigger cities, you don't see it as much. And so there's some work to be done. And we're not that big a city, but we have a big ego, I guess, or we punch it. We actually, it's run like a big city. So I think there's a big opportunity here, depending on the candidate pool. But yeah, it's heartening to see there are a lot of female city managers today. Although I think when Cynthia, you were city manager, it was much more rare.
wasn't as rare as public works director, but yes, it was still rare. I think that sometimes Pasadena feels overwhelming because we like to do things ourselves. We are one of the very few, everyone knows we're one of the three in the state that have a public health department. And we own a utility and we own power, we own hydro, we own, we're owning more and more green power. So I don't know that, and here comes my public works, but we're one of the few cities that actually collect our own trash. We have it's city employees that come to your house, and we're very proud of that. We want to do it ourselves. We have our own library system, which is phenomenal. We don't count on the county for any of the typical county services. That might feel overwhelming to some people, but it all comes down to what Miguel talked about. You hire the right people, you have the right leadership team, and you have a good relationship with the council, and you can do it.
I'm going to give each of you closing thoughts, and then I'm going to do closing thoughts. But we have two, if you be Karen and John.
I just wanted to ask you, was the order of those criteria that the council selected, was the first one the main one, or because if it was, we're in good hands?
I think they were viewed as integral, and I'm going to come back to that. So good question, John.
Part of the Pasadena ethos is having a lot of community input, endless community input. For external candidates, how do you evaluate whether someone really would be okay with that, or whether they might decide they know better and they're going to whip us into shape, by God?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question, John. I would say that it's imperative for all these candidates to have done their homework before they applied. And if they were smart, they may have made their way out here and put on dark glasses and wandered around the community to try to get a sense of things. Because without that kind of history of some sort that ties it to a community like Pasadena.
There's a guy behind the curtain, by the way, that's listening in.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, these candidates, it's imperative on them to do their homework. And for the internal candidates, they obviously have somewhat of an advantage because they have lived the experience. They've had assignments in the community. They have, if they're residents of the community, they've also voted and been a part of what is important in this city of Pasadena. So, I was just going to say also to the question towards Cynthia, it really does come back to values. And I think, as Miguel said earlier, he was interviewing the council. I think that to some degree, that's probably going to be a part of this process as well. And if someone doesn't feel like they line up for whatever the reason, they may just take themselves out of the running, because no one wants to step into a position where they know that there's some elements of it that is going to be a big learning curve. And if it involves community engagement and having a sense of what that is, that could be the kiss of death if they're not prepared.
Okay, so final thoughts, and then I'll close. Miguel, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think you had asked us to think about what
Mhm.
should we look for, what would be the expectation. Mine will be simple. I think you want to find a good person who does the right things for the right reasons.
Cynthia.
That's pretty hard to top. It's someone who has a strong work ethic, but has a strong ethical center, and knows that you cannot be a good leader if you're hiding money or telling incomplete information to your governing board or to your community, but understands that it all has to work together.
Chris.
I think you want someone who's a good listener, a great listener, someone who is trustworthy and transparent.
So, again, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight on a rainy night. It looks like the rain has stopped, so that's a good thing. You won't have to splash through the puddles to get back home. Yes, it is getting cold. So I'll be quick. Two things. I think what you've heard tonight is an emphasis not on we're looking for an environmentalist or we're looking for someone who's great at planning or someone who's worked, who's had a stadium that they've had to manage. Those technical skills are important, but not necessarily in the city manager. The city manager needs to pick someone to run the Rose Bowl. They need to pick someone to be point person on the environment. They need to understand how important planning is and make sure we have someone who's really going to value that. But it's less about what their specific qualifications or mindset might be, which makes Pasadena different. Because in a lot of cities, the expectation is, oh, we're a majority Latino city, so we want someone who's worked in a Latino city. Or we are a beach city, so we want someone who's had experience working in a beach town. Or we're a big city, so we want someone who's run in a big city. And our attitude on the council is much more, we're looking for someone who will be a terrific leader, the right person who will make the right decisions for the right reasons. I think that really sums it up. When I was on the city council in selecting a city manager, and so I've had the opportunity of being a council member and selecting city managers, being selected by a city council, and not being selected by a city council, because a couple of times I didn't get the job. And I asked, we were each given, there were 7 of us at the time, we were each given 2 questions. And we got to make up the questions for each of the candidates. And the 2 questions that I asked all of the candidates that we interviewed were, number 1, I said, our current city manager, that was Don McIntyre, likes to build things. He was we invested almost $1 billion, $500 million of infrastructure, that much of which is, we're benefiting from 30, 40 years later. I said, the current city manager likes to build things. What do you like to do? I wasn't so much like, do you want to do what I want to do? What do you want to do? And the person that I voted for said, I like to build relationships. And I thought, well, that's an interesting answer. I like that. And the second question I asked was, what's your favorite city? And it can't be the one you work in now, and it can't be Pasadena, right? Oh, Pasadena is my favorite town. And the person that I voted for, the same person who said I build relationships, said Venice, Italy. And what was interesting was African-American county manager from Durham, North Carolina. So from just a pure stereotype, you wouldn't expect necessarily that the person's favorite city would be Venice, Italy. But it turned out that his father was in the International Red Cross. And he'd actually spent much of his life in Europe and had an extremely sophisticated sort of view of what makes cities work. And so those 2 simple answers, I like to build relationships and I like Venice, Italy. I thought, well, this is someone, as it turned out, he did not get the job. However, he went on, by the way, to be the city manager of Washington, D.C. after not being chosen here in Pasadena. And the city manager that we got did a phenomenal job, and is as a good friend of all 4 of us to this day, and very loyal to Pasadena despite coming from elsewhere. Has never left, like Cynthia, and we hope Miguel. So this is an important decision. And the process is tomorrow from 4 to 6, the 8 of us will sit with those books and we'll select between 6 and 8 people to interview in about 2 weeks. We'll spend all day Saturday March the 6th or something like that, whatever that Saturday is, all day interviewing those 6 or 7 or 8 candidates. And we will have the benefit of, they've all been interviewed by the recruiter. They've done research on them. We haven't, done a background check which will happen before we hire anyone, trust me. But we've done a fair amount of research. And then if we come to consensus, we could be hiring someone as early as March the 9th. Now, of course, unless they're working here now, which is a possibility, typically it'll take 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe even a couple of months, because they'll have to tell their current employer, I'm leaving, and they'll of course will want to have some transition period. But we are hoping to make that decision quickly so that Miguel has the opportunity to do what he needs to do in his family. And so if we end up with an interim for a month or 2, that's probably not the worst thing in the world to have happen. But we hope to have a choice as early as March the 9th. And then we'll announce it. And hopefully it is the right person who will make the right decisions for the right reasons. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to all of you and to those who are listening in on Zoom. And this is a great city. But we have real challenges ahead, and the next city manager will have their work cut out for them. Thank you very much.